Mira stood at the edge of a quiet road, holding a folded paper that showed the address of her new house. The sun was sinking behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air smelled of dry leaves and forgotten times. Her small car was parked behind her, filled with boxes and bags. Inside the car sat her 10-year-old son Arlo, looking at the tall, broken house with wide eyes. The house stood alone beyond the hill, with peeling paint and tall grass covering its path. The windows were dusty and the roof had dark patches. But to Mira, it was more than just an abandoned place. It was a new beginning. After her husband Daniel passed away a year ago, she had been searching for a way to start again. Life in the city had become too heavy. The noise, the bills, and the memories felt too close. She found this house online. It was listed for $75,000. Everyone told her it was a bad idea. The house had been empty for many years. Some said it was haunted, others said it was falling apart. But Mira felt something pulling her toward it. The pictures showed a wide porch, a big yard, and rooms filled with sunlight. She thought it would be a place where Arlo could run, play, and breathe again. When they arrived, Arlo stepped out of the car and held her hand. "Is this really ours?" he asked softly. "Yes, it is," she said with a small smile. "It's old, but we'll make it beautiful." They walked up the narrow path. The wind blew softly through the trees, making the branches whisper. Mira pushed open the front door. It creaked loudly, but did not break. Dust floated in the air like small stars. The floor was covered in dirt, and the wallpaper was torn in places. But the house had space, light, and silence. That silence felt strange. It was deep and complete. Even Arlo noticed it. "Mom, it's too quiet here," he said, looking around. Mira laughed gently. "That's what peace sounds like," she said. They spent the next few hours cleaning the living room. Mira opened all the windows, letting fresh air in. The sunlight made the old wood shine a little. She swept the floor while Arlo explored the rooms. Upstairs, he found a small study filled with old furniture. There was a desk, a chair, and a tall mirror covered with a white cloth. "Mom," he called. "Someone left things here." Mira came up, wiping sweat from her forehead. She looked at the furniture. "Maybe the last owners didn't take everything," she said. She touched the desk and noticed initials carved into it. "D.W., she frowned. "Strange," she whispered. Daniel's full name had the same initials, Daniel Williams. That night, they stayed on air mattresses in the living room. Mira cooked instant noodles on a small stove. Arlo fell asleep early, tired from the long day. Mira sat near the window looking outside. The world beyond was dark and silent. She could not hear cars or people. Only the wind moved. Her phone showed no signal. She sighed and set it down. She missed Daniel more than she wanted to admit. Even after a year, she could still hear his laugh in her head. He used to talk about building a quiet home away from the city, somewhere peaceful where they could live free from noise. Maybe this was what he had meant. The next morning, Mira started unpacking. She found a few old notebooks in the study. Some pages were blank, others filled with faded writing. The handwriting looked strangely familiar. She sat at the desk and began to read one. The words were short but meaningful. "Silence is the only truth left here." Another line said, "If someone finds this, know that the world outside is not what it seems." Mira blinked and read again. The pages were torn after that, like someone had removed parts. She put the book aside, feeling uneasy. Arlo came in holding a small tin box he found in the attic. It was locked, and there was a faint letter engraved on top. D. "Maybe it's from the old owner," Arlo said. Mira nodded slowly. "Maybe," she said, but her mind was racing. Why did the initials match Daniel's? After lunch, Mira walked to the edge of the property. The land stretched far behind the house. She noticed something odd near the back fence in a small shed, half hidden by vines. The door was slightly open. She walked closer and pushed it. Inside were old tools, dusty boxes, and a strong smell of oil. On the wall hung a map. It showed the house and several marked spots around it. One mark was a red circle right under the house. Mira touched it, wondering what it meant. When she came back inside, Arlo was sitting on the floor near the tin box. He looked up. "I think it's moving," he said. She knelt beside him. "Moving?" He nodded. "I heard something inside." Like tapping. Mira placed her ear against the box. For a second, there was nothing. Then she heard it, a faint sound like a drop or a click from inside. Her hand trembled slightly. She placed the box on the desk. It's just old metal, she said, trying to smile. That night she dreamed of Daniel. He was standing in the same study, writing something at the desk. When he turned to her, his face was calm, but his eyes looked worried. He whispered something, but she could not hear him. The silence in the dream was deep, heavier than real life. When she woke up, her heart was racing. Morning light entered the room softly. Arlo was still asleep. Mira sat up and looked at the desk again. The tin box was gone. She stood quickly and looked around. It was not on the floor or the shelf. Panic rose inside her. Arlo, she called gently. He opened his eyes. Did you move the box? He shook his head. No, Mom, I didn't touch it. They searched the room, then the whole house, but the box was nowhere to be found. Later that day, while cleaning the kitchen, Mira noticed something on the wall near the sink. It was a small symbol carved into the wood. She rubbed it with a cloth, revealing the same initials again, DW. Her heart beat faster. She went outside to get some air. The silence of the place felt heavier now. Even the wind had stopped. The trees stood still. She could hear her own breath clearly. It was as if the world around her was holding something back. Mira whispered softly, Daniel, what did you leave behind here? As she turned to go back inside, she saw a shadow move behind one of the upstairs windows. Arlo was still outside near the car. The shadow had not been him. Mira froze, her heart pounding. The house stood silent, waiting. She looked up at the window again. Nothing moved now. Only the curtain swayed a little. She took a slow breath and stepped back inside. The floor creaked under her feet. The air inside the house felt colder than before. Something was hidden here, something connected to Daniel. And as she reached the study, she saw the tin box again. It was sitting on the desk where she had left it, shining faintly under the morning light. But this time the box was open. Mira stood still at the doorway of the study. The small tin box lay open on the desk, and a soft light from the window fell across it. Inside was a folded paper and something that looked like a small metal key. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the paper. The writing was faint but clear enough to read. If you hear the silence, you are already inside it. The key opens what I could not finish. There was no name written, but Mira knew that handwriting. It was Daniel's. She had seen it on letters, birthday notes, and small messages he used to leave for her. Her heart pounded as she read it again and again. Daniel had never told her about this place, yet his writing was here. Arlo came running into the room. Mom, did you find out what's inside? He asked eagerly. She nodded slowly. Just a note and a key, she said. She handed him the key. It was small and old, made of bronze. A number was engraved on it, 13. 13, Arlo said, turning it in his fingers. Maybe it opened something in the house. Mira nodded, though her mind was full of questions. She walked around the study, searching for a lock that might match the key. There was a cabinet near the corner with several drawers, but only one was locked. She inserted the key. It turned with a small click. Inside was another folded paper, this one thicker. It had a drawing on it, a sketch of the house from above. Lines and shapes showed hidden paths and small marks around the property. One mark was drawn under the stairs, marked with the same number, 13. Mira stared at it, puzzled. What was Daniel doing here? She whispered to herself. Arlo peered over her shoulder. Maybe it's a treasure map, he said with a smile. She smiled back, but her thoughts were darker. Daniel had been a quiet man, always thoughtful. Before he died, he had been working on something he never explained. He called it the Sound Project. She had thought it was about music, but maybe she had been wrong. Later that afternoon, they began cleaning the hallway near the stairs. The boards under their feet made hollow sounds. Mira knelt down and tapped one. It sounded different from the rest. She pulled up a loose plank and saw a small wooden door beneath it. Mom, look, Arlo said. The door was tiny, just large enough for a hand to fit through. It had a lock, but when Mira tried the bronze key, it turned easily. Inside was a small space filled with dust and an old notebook. She pulled it out carefully and opened it. The first page had Daniel's name on it. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned the pages slowly. They were filled with notes, sketches, and strange symbols. Many pages mentioned the same phrase again and again, the world inside the silence. Mira read a few lines aloud. When the world becomes too loud, it hides itself. The silence is not empty, it listens. Arlo looked confused. What does it mean? I don't know, Mira said softly. But your father wrote this. The notebook also had numbers and dates, most of them before Daniel's death. One page mentioned the same address of the house. Another mentioned Phase 2 complete, sound blocked within perimeter. Mira closed the book and stared at the wall. Why had Daniel bought this place without telling her? Why did he write as if he had been here before? That night she could not sleep. The air in the house felt too heavy, too quiet. Even when she moved her hand, she could not hear the sound of her sleeve brushing the blanket. It was not normal silence. It was complete stillness. She sat up and listened. Nothing. Not even the wind outside. Suddenly Arlo turned in his sleep and murmured something, but she could not hear it. His lips moved, but no sound reached her ears. Fear filled her chest. She stood and walked to the window. The trees were not moving, though the night sky was clear. It was as if time itself had slowed down. She whispered, "Hello?" But even her own voice felt distant. She grabbed her phone and tried to play a song, but the screen showed no sound waves. The song played in silence. The next morning, the world returned to normal. Birds chirped outside and Arlo's voice came clear again. He was already awake, sitting on the porch. "Mom, you have to see this," he said excitedly. She joined him outside. The yard looked brighter than before. On the wall near the porch, something new had appeared overnight. A pattern made of small scratches forming the same symbol from Daniel's notebook. It looked freshly carved. Mira traced it with her finger. "This was not here yesterday," she said. Arlo nodded. "Maybe Dad made it appear," he said innocently. She smiled weakly, unsure of what to say. Inside her heart, confusion grew stronger. She could not deny that strange things were happening, and somehow they were connected to Daniel. She decided to check the shed again. Inside, she found another map pinned behind the first one. It showed the same property, but with one extra mark, a red X inside the basement. There was a basement door in the kitchen floor, half broken. Mira had noticed it before, but thought it was just for storage. Now she knelt and pulled it open. The air that came out was cold and smelled of damp earth. She climbed down carefully while Arlo stayed near the top with a flashlight. The basement was large and dark. Shelves lined the walls, filled with old jars and tools. In the middle of the floor was a metal table covered with dust. On the table lay a broken headset connected to a small machine. Mira brushed the dust away. A note was placed under the machine. It said, "Silence is safety. Noise invites them." She felt a chill go through her body. The words did not make sense, yet they felt serious. "Mom, what's down there?" Arlo called. "Old things," she said. "Come down carefully." He climbed down and looked around. "This place is creepy," he said. She nodded. "Yes, but maybe your father was working here." Arlo touched the machine. "Does it still work?" Mira shook her head. "It looks broken." He turned the switch and a low humming sound filled the basement. The lights flickered. Mira shouted for him to stop, but the sound grew louder for a moment and then vanished completely. Suddenly, they both realized something. They could not hear anything anymore. The world above had gone silent again. Even their footsteps made no noise. Arlo's mouth moved, but Mira could not hear his words. Panic filled her as she reached out and pulled the switch back. The machine stopped and slowly the sound of their breathing returned. Mira hugged Arlo tightly. "Don't touch anything again," she said, her voice shaking. When they went back upstairs, the air felt thick and strange. The clock on the wall had stopped. The phone showed no signal once more. That night, she read more pages from Daniel's notebook. One entry caught her attention. "The silence is a field. Once opened, it spreads. It listens to memories. It keeps what it hears. I must stop it before it reaches her." Mira felt her chest tighten. Before it reaches her. Was he talking about her? Or someone else? The next morning, Mira packed the notebook and the key into her bag. She decided to visit the small town nearby to ask about the house's past. Maybe someone knew Daniel had been here before, but when she opened the front door, she froze. There were footprints on the porch leading away from the house. They were large and deep, but they did not belong to her or Arlo. She followed them with her eyes until they disappeared into the woods behind the house. The silence around her grew thicker once again, and when she turned back, she saw something written on the wall beside the door. Words carved into the wood in Daniel's handwriting. "Don't listen to the quiet. It already knows you." Mira stood in front of the words carved into the wood. The morning light made them clearer. Her heart thumped hard as she traced the letters with her fingers. The message was fresh. The wood was still rough where it had been cut. She whispered softly, "Daniel, what did you mean by this?" Arlo came out behind her, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, are you talking to someone?" She turned to him and smiled a little. "No, honey, just thinking out loud." He looked at the footprints near the steps. "Who came here?" "I don't know," she said. "But we will find out." She locked the door and started the car. The road to town was rough and full of trees. The house grew smaller behind them as they drove away. Mira tried to shake off the strange feeling that someone was still watching from the windows. The town was quiet, with small houses and a few shops. The people looked curious when she asked about the old house beyond the hill. At the grocery store, an old man behind the counter paused when he heard which house she was talking about. "You bought the Whitefield place?" he asked slowly. "Yes," Mira said. "Do you know anything about it?" The man nodded. "That house has a long story. It was built by a man named David Whitefield 50 years ago. He worked on strange machines. People said he wanted to block out the world's noise. One night he vanished and nobody went near that place again. They said the silence there was not natural." Mira's stomach turned. "Did anyone else live there after him?" "Some tried," the man said, lowering his voice. "A few families came and left in less than a week. They said it felt like the air inside listened to them." Mira thanked him and walked out, her mind spinning. She sat in the car and looked at Arlo, who was eating candy happily. She forced a smile. "Let's go home," she said. As they drove back, clouds covered the sky. The air grew heavy and the forest looked darker. When they reached the house, the first thing she noticed was the door slightly open. She was sure she had locked it. "Stay close to me," she told Arlo. They stepped inside carefully. Nothing seemed touched, but the air felt colder. On the study desk, the notebook lay open again. A new line was written on the last page. "The silence grows stronger when you try to leave." Mira's hand shook as she closed it. "This was not here before," she whispered. Arlo looked at her nervously. "Mom, maybe Dad is trying to tell us something." She tried to smile. "Maybe." But deep inside, she felt a chill. That night, Mira could not sleep. The wind outside had stopped again. She sat on the porch looking into the dark trees. The stillness of the night pressed against her ears. It felt like the world had stopped breathing. Then she heard a faint hum, low and steady, coming from inside the house. It sounded like the machine in the basement. She rushed inside and went down the stairs. The old machine was on again, lights blinking softly. She switched it off quickly, but before she could go back up, she heard something behind her. "Mira," a voice said softly. She froze. It was Daniel's voice. She turned around, but no one was there. The air was cold and empty. Her heart raced. "Daniel?" she whispered. "Is that you?" No answer came, only a soft vibration in the walls like the house was breathing. The next morning, Arlo said he had heard something too. "I heard Dad calling me," he said. "He said, Mo, don't go outside." Mira's chest tightened. She knelt in front of him. "You didn't go, right?" He shook his head. "No, I stayed in bed." She hugged him tight, then went to the study again. She opened Daniel's notebook. A few more words had appeared. "You can hear me because the silence wants you to." Mira dropped the notebook. She did not know if it was her mind playing tricks, but everything felt connected now. The machine, the maps, the silence, and Daniel. She spent the day searching through the attic. Inside a box of old papers, she found a file with the words Project Soundwall written on it. The papers inside showed diagrams of sound waves, barriers, and frequency fields. Notes written in Daniel's hand explained that he was trying to create a zone where no outside noise could enter. But one note caught her attention. If the field grows too strong, it may trap sound and memory inside itself. Human presence may trigger echoes of the past. Mira's heart pounded as she read. It meant Daniel might have tested the project here. Maybe that was why his voice was still in the house. That evening, she went outside and looked at the sky. The wind was still missing. The silence pressed against her ears again. She tried to speak, but her voice vanished before it reached her own ears. Arlo ran out, scared. "Mom, I can't hear you," he cried. Mira grabbed his hand. The silence swallowed everything around them. The trees stopped moving. The air was still. It was as if they were trapped inside a bubble where the world could not enter. Then from the direction of the forest, they saw light flicker. It looked like lanterns moving slowly between the trees. The lights glowed blue and white. Arlo pointed. Mom, who is that? Mira pulled him back. Inside now, she said firmly. They ran into the house and locked the door. The lights outside stopped near the edge of the yard. Mira held Arlo close, both of them breathing fast. After a long moment, the lights faded. The sound returned suddenly. The crickets, the wind, and their own breathing. Mira sat down, trying to calm her heart. Something is happening here, she whispered. Something your father was part of. Later that night, she opened the small tin box again. Under the paper, there was a hidden compartment. Inside it, she found a small voice recorder. It had a red button and looked old. She pressed play. At first, there was only static. Then Daniel's voice came through, soft but clear. If you found this, it means the field is still active. The silence listens now. It will use our voices to keep itself alive. Do not let it reach the core. The basement holds the switch. Mira's hands shook as she listened. The message ended with the sound of heavy breathing, then silence. Arlo looked scared. What does it mean, Mom? It means your father was trying to stop this, she said. And now it's our turn. She took a flashlight and went back to the basement. The air there was thick. The machine stood quiet, but a faint blue light glowed from beneath the floor. She knelt and saw a small metal hatch covered by dust. When she touched it, the light flickered. She turned to call Arlo, but he was standing at the top of the stairs. Mom, he said in a frightened voice. Someone is at the door. Mira climbed up quickly. When she reached the living room, she saw a figure standing outside the window. It looked like a man, tall and still. The face was hidden in shadow, but the shape felt familiar. Her heart pounded. Daniel? She whispered. The figure raised its hand slowly and pointed toward the forest. Then it disappeared. Arlo grabbed her hand. Mom, that was Dad. I saw him. Mira held him close. Maybe it was, she said softly. But if it was, then he's trying to show us something. She looked out again. The silence returned, stronger than before. The air felt heavy, pressing against her skin. She took a deep breath and said, Tomorrow we go to the forest, because now she knew whatever truth Daniel had hidden. It was waiting out there beyond the silence. The morning came with a pale gray sky. The sun looked weak behind the clouds. Mira packed a small bag with water, the notebook, and the bronze key. Arlo stood near the porch, holding the flashlight and a snack. His face showed both fear and excitement. Mom, are we really going to the forest? He asked. Yes, Mira said firmly. Your father wanted us to see something. We can't ignore it now. They locked the house and started walking down the narrow path behind the backyard. The air felt heavy and the silence grew thicker with every step. The sound of their shoes on the ground faded slowly until it was gone. Even the sound of the leaves brushing against their clothes disappeared. Mira tried to speak, but her voice felt trapped inside her own head. She reached for Arlo's hand and squeezed it. He looked scared but nodded. The forest looked old, with tall trees that bent toward each other like they were whispering. The ground was soft and covered with dry leaves. The deeper they went, the darker it became. After a while, Mira saw something between the trees, a wooden gate half broken and covered in moss. Behind it stood an old shed. She pushed the gate gently. It opened without a sound. Inside the shed, there were shelves filled with jars, wires, and papers. It looked like a small lab. On one wall hung a large photo of Daniel. Mira froze. It was a picture she had never seen before. He looked younger, wearing a lab coat and holding a strange device that looked like a microphone made of glass. Arlo stared at the picture. Dad was here, he said softly. Mira walked closer and saw writing on the back of the photo. It said, "The core is buried below. Do not break the silence unless you must." She looked around and found a hatch in the floor. The same number was written on it. 13. Mira used the bronze key to unlock it. The hatch opened, revealing a ladder leading underground. Cold air rose from below. Arlo's hand shook in hers. "Stay close to me," she said. They climbed down carefully. The tunnel was narrow and dark, but the flashlight showed old wires running along the walls. At the end of the tunnel, they reached a small chamber made of stone. In the middle of it stood a round metal sphere connected to cables and switches. The surface of the sphere glowed faintly blue. On the wall above it, someone had written with chalk, "Sound core, do not activate." Mira stared at it in silence. The machine was still running. The low hum in the air came from here. Arlo looked around. "Mom, is this what Dad was working on?" "Yes," she said. "He called it Project Soundwall. This must be the center of it." She touched the metal carefully. It was cold, but pulsing with a faint vibration. Suddenly, a small speaker on the wall crackled. Daniel's voice came through again. "Mira, if you can hear this, I did not finish it in time. The silence feeds on memory. It keeps what we lose. You have to shut it down before it reaches beyond the field." Mira's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "How, Daniel?" "Tell me how." The voice continued, "There is a switch near the sphere. It must be turned when the hum is strongest. The silence will resist, but you must not stop. Once it ends, you will hear the world again." The message ended. The room went quiet. Mira looked at the small switch beside the sphere. "We can do this," she said. "Your father left this for us." Arlo nodded. "I'll help." She placed her hand on the switch. The hum around them grew louder. The light inside the sphere brightened. As she began to turn the switch, the air around them rippled like waves. The silence grew so deep that even her heartbeat felt lost inside it. Arlo shouted something, but she could not hear him. His lips moved, his eyes wide with fear. Shadows began to move on the walls, shapes that looked like faces. Mira tightened her grip and turned the switch harder. The light exploded into the room, blinding her for a moment. The hum turned into a sharp vibration. Then everything stopped. When she opened her eyes, the sphere was dark. The silence was gone. She could hear Arlo breathing. She could hear her own voice as she said, "It's over." But the relief did not last. A low echo came from the tunnel behind them, like footsteps approaching slowly. Mira held Arlo close. "We have to go," she said. They climbed back up the ladder quickly and ran out of the shed. The forest was no longer silent, but it felt wrong. The air moved strangely, and the sky above looked pale like smoke. As they reached the edge of the forest, Mira stopped. The house was ahead of them, but it looked different. The windows were glowing faintly, and a soft whisper filled the air. Arlo whispered, "Mom, the house is talking." Mira listened. The whisper sounded like many voices blended together. She could hear Daniel's voice among them, saying her name again and again. She ran toward the house, pulling Arlo with her. The moment she stepped onto the porch, the whisper stopped. The door opened on its own. Inside, everything looked the same but cleaner. The dust was gone, the walls looked new, and the light through the windows was warm. It felt like stepping into a memory. Daniel's picture was on the table, the same one that had once hung in his office. Beside it was a letter. Mira picked it up. The paper was yellow and soft. "If you found this, then you broke the silence. The world will return, but not as before. The field was made to keep the noise of the world away. I wanted peace for us, but I made a mistake. The silence listens to those who love too much. It took me first. It will let you go if you understand it. Do not fight it. Just remember me." Mira felt tears roll down her face. Arlo hugged her tightly. "Dad's not gone, right?" he asked in a small voice. She smiled sadly. "He's part of this place now," she said. "But we are safe." For a moment, everything was calm. The air felt normal again. Birds sang outside. The sun broke through the clouds. Mira thought it was truly over. But when she looked at the window, her reflection was not alone. Daniel stood beside her, smiling softly. His lips moved, forming the words she could not hear. Then he faded like smoke. Arlo saw it too. "He's happy now," he said quietly. Mira nodded. "Yes, I think he is." They spent the rest of the day cleaning the house, trying to bring it back to life. The silence never returned the same way. It became a calm stillness instead of emptiness. At night, Mira sat on the porch watching the stars. The world felt alive again, but deep down she knew something remained unfinished. Later, as she tucked Arlo into bed, he asked, "Mom, what if the silence comes back?" Mira stroked his hair. "Then we will face it again," she said. "We know the truth now." After Arlo slept, she went back to the study. The notebook lay open. A new line had appeared on the last page. "Thank you for hearing me." She smiled, closed the notebook, and turned off the light. The house was peaceful. But as she walked away, she did not notice the faint hum that started again beneath the floor, soft and steady, like a heartbeat waiting in the dark. The next morning, the sun rose behind a blanket of white mist that rolled over the fields. The old house stood silent, its windows shining in the soft light. Mira stood on the porch holding a cup of tea. Her hands were shaking slightly. She had not slept all night. The events of the past week had changed her life. She had come here to find peace, but instead, she had found a secret buried under years of silence. A small knock came from the front door. Mira turned. It was a man in a dark blue uniform. He introduced himself as Officer Lewis. He had received her call last night. Mira told him about the tunnel, the letters, and the locked room in the basement. She guided him to the door behind the stairs. When they opened it, the air smelled damp and old. They went down slowly, with the officer's flashlight cutting through the darkness. The tunnel stretched under the house. The walls were covered with wooden panels and strange marks. Mira followed closely behind the officer. Her heart was beating fast. At the end of the tunnel was a small metal door. Lewis pushed it open. Inside was a room filled with old boxes, papers, and a single table. On it lay a small black recorder and a few photographs. The officer examined everything carefully. Mira stood frozen when she saw one of the photos. It was of her late husband, Armin, sitting with two unknown men in front of this same house. The date written on the back was from 8 years ago, long before she knew about this place. Her throat went dry. Lewis found a few documents written in another language. He placed them in a bag for inspection, but one folder had her name on it. He handed it to her. Mira hesitated, then opened it. Inside were copies of property papers, bank transactions, and one letter written by Armin. The paper had faded with time, but she could still read it. Mira, it began. If you are reading this, it means you have found the house. I wanted to tell you the truth, but life never gave me the chance. This house was once owned by my father. He lost it because of a mistake I made. I bought it again secretly to fix what was broken, but I could not tell you. I worked with 2 men to recover the money, but they betrayed me. I hid everything here. I thought I could make it right before you ever found out. I am sorry. Mira felt tears fall on the paper. Her husband's handwriting was shaky, but his words carried pain and regret. The officer put a hand on her shoulder and said gently that they would take all this for further checking. Mira nodded. She felt empty and full at the same time. Later that afternoon, Lewis left with the evidence. Mira sat in the living room with Rhea. The little girl was playing quietly with her toy bear. Mira looked around the house. The broken things now seemed alive with stories. Every wall, every creak, every shadow carried memories she had not known. In the evening, an old car stopped near the gate. An old woman stepped out holding a basket of apples. It was the same woman Mira had met at the store earlier. She smiled kindly and said she had heard about the police coming. Mira invited her inside. The woman looked around and sighed. I used to come here long ago, she said softly. Your husband's father helped many families. But when this place closed, everything changed. Some people wanted the land. I think your husband tried to save it. Mira listened carefully. The woman said she would tell the townspeople that the house was no longer cursed. She said Mira was brave to come back and face what others had feared. Mira thanked her and gave her tea. That night, after putting Rhea to sleep, Mira went back to the porch. The stars were shining bright. She opened her husband's letter again and read it slowly. The wind brushed her face. She realized that all the whispers, the shadows, and the strange things that had happened were signs leading her to the truth. Her husband had made mistakes, but he had also tried to make things right. Mira decided she would not sell the house. Instead, she would repair it and make it a safe home again. She wanted Rhea to grow up here, where her father's story could live in light, not darkness. She knew it would take time, but she felt strong. Over the next few weeks, workers came to fix the broken walls and clean the basement. The tunnel was sealed for safety, but Mira kept the old letter and a few photos as memory. The house began to change. The paint was new, the air smelled fresh, and the silence no longer felt heavy. Rhea started going to the local school, and Mira opened a small art studio in one of the rooms. People from the town visited and helped her decorate. Slowly, laughter and warmth filled the house that once held secrets. One morning, Mira found a small envelope under the front mat. Inside was a note with neat handwriting. It said, "He was proud of you. Keep this house alive." There was no name, only a pressed white flower. Mira smiled and placed it in her husband's old notebook. She looked up at the blue sky and felt peace for the first time in years. Months later, the house stood strong, painted in soft cream and green. The garden was full of flowers. Mira would often sit on the porch watching Rhea play and think of how everything had changed. The silence that once felt strange now felt safe. She no longer feared what the walls held. Instead, she felt that they listened, carried her stories, and gave her comfort. She had come here broken and afraid, but had found truth. Forgiveness and courage. One evening, as the sun set and the world turned quiet, Mira whispered to herself, "I can hear the world now." She smiled, knowing that sometimes silence is not emptiness. Sometimes it is where love hides, waiting to be found again. And in that old house on the edge of the town, peace finally stayed.